So the second the presentation will be given by Professor Aref.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be able to take part not only at this meeting, but in the program. I try to share my PowerPoint presentation if I can. Yes, just 1 minute. I hope you are able to see it. Is it fine?
Yes.
Can you see the slides? Okay, so I would like to start with presenting our institution, the Open Society Archives, which is part of the Central European University, which is very much a unit of the university, but at the same time, it's academically and conceptually an independent unit of the university. It was established 25 years ago in 1995, at the moment when the American Congress decided to cut the budget of a very important Cold War institution, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, radio stations that broadcast from the other side of the Iron Curtain to the countries under Soviet domination. And after the end of the Cold War, the American administration decided to cut the budget. The radios decided to get rid of their huge archive, which is, besides the Hoover archive at Stanford, the largest Cold War archive in the world. The focus of the archive is the period between the end of the Second World War and the end of communism in East and Central Europe, that is 1989, 1990, although we are very much interested as well in the afterlife of communism as well. And in the meantime, our archive became probably the largest archive of documents related to grave violations of human rights worldwide. So our two focal points are the bipolar world in the second part of the 20th century and human rights. There is a film about the archive, which you can find on YouTube. We Are What We Remember. It's a film incidentally made by a very eminent documentary filmmaker, Jesse Dillon, who happens to be Bob Dylan's son, who spent a lot of time in the archive and produced this film. I will come back to the archive, but before doing that, let me share with you some images and thoughts, because public history or history in the public is happening right now around us. This is a photograph of a defaced statue of Winston Churchill in London from last week. I want to mention that what's happening in American cities and in some European cities, it's not a completely new phenomenon. Public history has been with us from the very early times, from Imperial Rome, when there was a practice of excluding from memory certain figures, military leaders, or leaders of the Imperium who fell out of favor, and their photographs or their names have been erased from public memory, from public monuments. That was a kind of historical revisionism already in Imperial Rome, but as you can see, it's going on. On the left-hand side, this is a statue of Leopold II, the Belgian monarch who ruled over the Congo. And on the other side, there is, that's from London, and dressed up statue of a military leader who looks as if he were a chief of a tribe. Here we have Christopher Columbus beheaded in one of the southern states of the United States because of who he was, although his only ambition was to find a route to India, and to his bad fortune or luck ended up in the New World. These are the Taliban's blowing up the famous Buddha monuments in Afghanistan. So public history is going on and around us. And so what is it? First of all, I would like to go back to a remark by Toru, who said that public history is now emerging in Japan. As far as I know, already in 2004, an annual journal was published, and ever since it has been in publication by the Department of the Study of Occidental History at Osaka University. So whereas, for example, in Japan, there is a special journal devoted to public history, in Hungary, we don't have such an official journal. We have some historical journals for the public, but it's not a scholarly take on issues of public history. We can understand public history in a broad sense, including heritage sites and public monuments, and also the official efforts by governments to present, represent, or represent, rewrite history. And there is the background historical context, some knowledge about history in the general public that has been received wisdom, learned from schools, and family traditions. There are folk rituals in which this understanding of public history finds an expression, but there is a more restricted interpretation, and this is what we are doing. And I very much hope that this is what we will be able to present to our students, which is an active, reflexive engagement with historical notions, assumptions, events, and figures, and to study and react to historical revisionism, which should be evidence-based, factual, methodologically solid professional engagement. And the aim of this activity, and this is what we would like to suggest to our students, that our ambition is to turn matters of fact into matters of concern. That it makes a difference how we think about history, how we relate to our past, and the way we relate to our past has a very important impact on our present. I would like to mention that according to the curriculum of the HIPS program, the members of the staff of the archive will offer courses on memory politics, history of memory, archival and documentary and evidentiary practices. And then, according to the curriculum, the students, or some of the students at least, will spend a month in the wintertime in the archive, taking part in the life of the archive, both dealing with our documents of the past, how they are interpreted, made use of, and what we as a publicly engaged activist institution try to do with these documents. We have for the past 25 years a very intensive public exhibition programs. We curated over 100 exhibitions in these 25 years. And I very much hope when the students will be there, they will be able to take part in the curatorial work of the archive as well. Now, I will leave out these slides. These are just documents how the public can engage with official historical interpretation. These are photographs of a monument set up by the Hungarian government in order to prove and embody in a tangible way that Hungary is not responsible for the horrors that happened during the Second World War, including the deportation of over 500,000 Hungarian Jews. It was the Germans who were responsible, and this is a monument set up to commemorate the German occupation of Hungary in March 1944 with the consent of the then Hungarian government. And then the public decided to engage and to fence the monument and to set up a counter monument in front of it. So it's a very interesting dialogue between official historical revisionist attempts and the reaction of the public to these the same square, there is a monument which was set up after. Can you hear me now? Hello? Yes, because I lost connection. Something happened, and I'm back now. I apologize. Something happened. Is it fine now? Okay. So then these are just a few other slides. In Hungary, there is a so-called sculpture park. This is one way also to engage with objects, monuments of the past in public after 1989, when a lot of communist monuments were being removed. There was a private initiative to set up a sculpture park, a museum or a ghetto for these communist period monuments, and to deport these objects and monuments there. So this is one possible way to deal with contested issues of the past. There are other possible ways there to neutralize certain monuments by the help of placing other monuments next to what's happening there. It may be a blackout or problem with the internet connection. I very much apologize for that. So I really don't know what's happening. Can you see now the shared screen once more? Is it fine? Can you hear me? Lotzi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. That's
okay,
fine.
I'm sorry. So anyway, this is another possibility. This is a so-called counter monument in a German city where there was a fountain sponsored by a Jewish prominent citizen at the end of the 19th century, which was destroyed during the Kristallnacht in Germany. And then at the beginning of the 2000s, the city decided to replace the monument, but instead of simply rebuilding the monument, they decided to turn it upward down. And they built the same monument, then they turned it into the ground and then covered it, and only the base can be seen as a sort of a counter monument. The past is there, but it is buried, and the very top of this fountain is very deep in the ground, as if it were poisoning the ground wells, the ground waters, as if in the old medieval accusations against the Jews that they are spreading the plague and the other infectious diseases by infecting the groundwaters. I leave this out. Now, I would like to just mention this last point. This is a photograph taken in the last hall of the Museum of Japanese Americans in Los Angeles. This is a museum about the life of Americans who had originally emigrated from Japan to the United States. And the museum deals specifically with the history of Japanese Americans during the Second World War, when, as you know, a large percentage of these Americans were interned as enemies of the state during the Second World War. And this is the last hall. I was there, and I saw this hall full of luggages up to the ceiling. And first I did not why this representation of the luggages, and then it obviously came to my mind that this is almost a replica of one of the halls in the Auschwitz Birkenau concentration and extermination camp, where a large number of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust were exterminated, among them over 400,000 Hungarians. And there is this hall with the luggages there, because the people were both there, they came with their luggages, then they became gassed and murdered, and the luggages remained. While in the case of the Japanese Americans, the people were tragically interned during the Second World War, but fortunately, at the end of the war, the people took their luggages and went back home. But there is this topos of the horror of what can happen with an ethnicity or with a group of people. And so the curators of this museum felt that in order to show the graveness of the tragedy, they should use an image which is similar to the most well-known, one of the most well-known images of horror. That's this room of the Auschwitz camp. And so this is a misrepresentation in Los Angeles in the museum, and it took some time for me to understand this. Now I will try to show you something.
Ön tudta, hogy ez a ház 1944-ben csillagos ház volt? Emlékezzünk együtt, ugyanitt, ez év június 21-én.
Ön tudta, hogy ez a ház 1944-ben csillagos ház volt? Emlékezzünk
This is a program which we did some years ago the so-called Yellow Star Houses program. That was the 70th anniversary of the murder of the Hungarian Jews. And we decided to try to commemorate this together with the whole city. And we decided to make a list of all those buildings which were designated as so-called Yellow Star houses in the summer of 1944. About 2,000 such houses all over the city, and this is how it looks like now. We sent letters to tenants in all these buildings, asking them to open the house on the day of, these are memories of the people who live in the house right now. So we asked the people to open the house on this particular day, June the 21st, and either to put a commemorative plaque on the building or organize events. This happened to be a Saturday, and there were over 160 houses open throughout the day. You can see the time slots. It started early in the morning and it went on and on and on until 12 noon. And we created this website for the public with photographs and documents and information in order to explain what happened, because that was a story which has been suppressed in collective memory. People did not want to remember these horrors, and it seemed better not to talk about it. And it was an open secret that it happened until 6 years ago. And then we thought that we should do something, and we found even, I can't open this film, unfortunately. Yes, it will open. It was not just a public event organized by us, but it was something in which we tried not only to involve the public, but to provide factual, professional, persuasive, historically truthful information to the public in order to learn about these events and to react to these events. And also we tried to involve the public into these commemorative events, doing something together, teaching by doing, educating by explaining things with the involvement of the people of the city. And I think it was a very useful exercise on our part. There is a YouTube channel. You can see films of the commemorative events on June 21st, 2014. I think that ever since 6 new books were published about the Yellow Star House story. It is part of public knowledge nowadays. It's not possible to remember 1944 without taking into consideration the story of these houses. I would like to mention as well that we have, for example, this ongoing exhibition at the moment, because since 2014 we have it's very slow to upload. Perhaps it can't. Oh, yes, no. I cannot upload it. Anyway, there is now. So anyway, there is now an exhibition, an online exhibition and a physical exhibition as well, but it can be visited only online with the title Faith, Trust and Secrecy. And it's about the persecution of small religious communities under the time of communism, based on reports, informer reports, Secret Service reports, and photographs by the secret police. So we tried to turn these secret documents inside out and present the way how the secret police perceived these religious movements, and try to confront the public with this strange enemy image of something which went on for decades under the time of the political regime before 1989. So what I would like to say is that the archive is an important element of this program, and I very much hope that the students will be able to feel that the archival part of the History in Public Spaces program is an integral element of the program, and we'll also learn there by doing things in the way how we try to engage with the public, trying to get into an active relationship with the outside world when we leave the walls of the archive and go out to the streets, to the public space. So thank you very much. And if there were questions, I'm ready to answer. If not, then we are welcoming your students in the fall in the archive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, István, so for very much so stimulating and very comprehensive introduction to the public history. And it's so we are very much so impressed by the very so challenging activities of so to say the doing history in Budapest. I think this Yellow House project is among others so one of the most impressive project I found it, and I strongly recommend you to visit the website of the Open Society Archive. István, please, please find one question in the chat. Could you?
Yes. Yes. Now the House of Terror is also a very important. By the way, this Yellow Star Houses slide is not my presentation. I think that this is Taku's screen, what we can see here. It's not me.
Yes, I will.
So I try to answer this question. So the House of Terror is a very important public history, if I may say that, institution. It is a very important propaganda tool opened by the first Orbán government in 2002, just before the elections in that year, in the building of the former headquarters of the Hungarian fascists, the Arrow Cross movement, which after the Second World War became the headquarters of the communist secret police with its interrogation rooms and torture chambers. And the Orbán government tried to present very successfully this museum, which is not just a museum, it's also a monument, because it is an architecturally quite sophisticated building. The example was Mussolini's exhibition on the 10th anniversary of the March to Rome. The government tried to convince the public that Hungary has always been just a victim of outside sources, the great powers, first the Germans and then the Soviets. And the communist rule was even more horrible and longer lasting than the rule of the fascists and the Nazis. And school children are obliged to visit this museum. And there is a official historical brainwashing going on every single day in that very impressive, strange, kitschy, but sophisticated building.
The next speaker will be the Professor László Kontler. And so, of course, every university is a kind of the site of memory or site of the public history. For example, our university, the Tokyo University Foreign Studies, is very much so marked by the Japanese colonialism. It was so strongly connected to the colonial expansion of Japanese Empire after the Second World War. But still, the Central European University is very unique, above all, because of its origin and the development. So after the fall of the communism, the end of the Cold War. So could you please, let's see, start?
Yeah, thank you very much, Taku, for the opportunity to speak here, and also for your generous introduction of the members of the Department of History. In that context, you kindly mentioned that I'm a founding member, but it must be pointed out that there are actually more than one individuals in that status among us here. István, who has just spoken about the Open Society Archives, is not only a founding member of our department as well, but he was also the first academic director of the Budapest campus of CU before our first rector was appointed. Now let me try to share my screen and also enlarge it. Yeah. Okay. So as Taku mentioned, CU is perhaps quite exceptional in the sense and to the degree in which its foundation and its early history and the whole of its history is in fact deeply embedded into larger historical contexts. So it is an institution very much in the public. So it is all the more appropriate for it to be part of a consortium that is dedicating itself to the teaching of history in the public sphere. And this embeddedness in the public may have to do with the mission. It is all universities have a mission, but CU has a particular mission in emphasizing not only academic excellence in research and teaching, but also its dedication to the values and the ideals of open society, i.e. excellence in academic sense is pursued closely entwined with the pursuit of these values. Now, in turn, this dedication to the values of open society is inseparable from the person of the founder. It's well known that the university was founded by George Soros, who probably needs no introduction because he's in various media outlets almost every day. What is necessary maybe to mention here, and what may not be as well known, is that Soros is a Hungarian Jewish emigre, first to Britain and then to the United States. He left the country after the communist takeover in 1947. And he studied in Great Britain at the London School of Economics and became very enthusiastic about the ideas of the philosopher Karl Popper, especially as they are embedded in his great work, The Open Society and Its Enemies. The gist of that work being that no one has a monopoly over the truth. The pursuit of knowledge is a collective enterprise, and knowledge emerges in the free exchange of ideas amongst various stakeholders. And therefore, the adequate and appropriate context for sound knowledge and the pursuit of the truth is what Popper calls open societies. This is impossible to do and to achieve under repressive regimes. So open society and the values of open society, loosely understood, are associated with the rule of law, respect and cultivation of civil freedoms, human rights in more general terms, protection of minorities, still broader terms, values of tolerance, mutual respect, and the pursuit of social justice. In the classroom, of course, it's an atmosphere in which diverse opinions can be voiced and listened to and debated by relying on the pursuit of sound knowledge and mutual respect. It's also important that CEU is an international institution. It was meant to be an international institution from the very first time. There are a large number of very international universities which host students from many, many countries. CEU is distinctive on account of its having no dominant national cultures. So students every year come from 80 to 100 countries, but there's no national majority. The other distinctiveness is that it has multiple accreditations. We hold accreditation from the United States, as well as for the time being from Hungary, and now because of the recent developments, we are in the process of seeking and hopefully obtaining very soon accreditation in Austria. Another distinctive feature may be that until now it has been focusing on graduate programs in the social sciences, humanities, law, business, and administration. We are now setting up small-scale undergraduate programs because of the requirements of Austrian accreditation. So the founding was formally taking place in 1991, but there is a quite complex and interesting prehistory. I have compiled here a kind of rough chronology, but I shall not really stick to it because it might be confusing. What is important to mention that the antecedents go back to the middle of the 1980s, where when the foundations of George Soros started operating in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. Soros, who became a very successful businessman in the United States in the 1970s, decided to start philanthropic activities, that is sponsoring groups who for various reasons are deprived of access to cultural goods. Various programs were started by his foundation to sponsor such predominantly young people. The first programs were actually launched in South Africa, sponsoring Black students, supporting them with scholarships in 1979, I think. Communist countries became the targets of the operations of the foundation in the middle of the 1980s. Characteristically, at least in the Hungarian case, this was not possible as an independent foundation, so there had to be a consortium, or as they called it, a joint committee of the Soros Foundation and the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. You can see George Soros in this very poor photograph sitting on the left side, signing the relevant documents with representatives both of his own foundation and the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Counterparts were created elsewhere in the region, first in Poland and elsewhere, and then in other countries. Now, a couple of words about the activities of the foundation. It gave opportunities to travel and study abroad for a wide segment of intellectuals, academics, scholars, especially young people, students. Locally, it also sponsored cultural institutions with technology and infrastructure. One very successful enterprise was the supply of photocopiers to various publishers, journals, and other cultural institutions. The tacit aim being to break the information monopoly of communist governments. As to the scholarship programs, one emblematic program was the Oxford scholarship program for young graduates of universities. Every year from about, I think, 1985, graduates from the region could spend an entire academic year with an appointed supervisor in their respective fields at the University of Oxford. Actually, quite a few members of the CU faculty were beneficiaries of that program, but also, quite ironically, important members of the current government party of Hungary, including the Prime Minister himself, took advantage of this wonderful opportunity at some point in the 1980s. An important change came about in 1988-1989, when it was decided that the Soros Foundation would sponsor a series of courses largely in the social sciences and humanities at the Inter-University Center in Dubrovnik, the picturesque Adriatic city. Now, the IUC was founded, that itself is an interesting story. The IUC was founded in 1972 as an institution on neutral ground. Yugoslavia was a non-allied country, where academics, scholars, and intellectuals from the East and West could meet on neutral ground and engage in free intellectual and academic discussion. The characteristic format was 1 or 2 week seminars, and as I mentioned, the Soros Foundation decided to support a series of seminars specifically dedicated to the incipient transformations that were taking place with the slow and gradual opening up of the communist systems of Eastern Europe. The umbrella topic was the culture of Central and Eastern Europe, and various courses in April 1989 were organized in sociology, politics, history, literature, and related subjects. Here on the left side of the screen, you can see the announcement of the courses, in particular the course in history. On the right, you can see some important professors who are participating in delivering the course, in particular Peter Honak, the white-haired gentleman taking a break during the course. Now, associated with these courses, there was also a conference dedicated to discussing the turn of these courses into a permanent institution. Actually, the name Central European University was also mentioned and discussed. It was not entirely clear what the nature of the institution would be. Most participants were talking about a graduate university, a kind of graduate school / an institute for advanced study kind of institution, whose mission would have been to disseminate ideas of open society, to convert and train the intellectual and academic elite of the region, to democratic pluralism, market economy, and in general terms to undermine the credibility, as some of the participants said, of communist ideology. Now, of course, talking about April 1989, there was a certain amount of irony about this program, and also underlines the fact that social scientists, including historians, are not futurologists, so very few, if any, among the participants could have predicted that within a couple of months, the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia would have happened. Communism was being dismantled in Hungary and Poland. The Berlin Wall would come down, and even the Romanian Revolution would take place. In any case, the institution that was slowly, well, not so slowly actually, within 2 years, getting on its feet, was still intended to be a laboratory of creating the intellectual and academic foundations of the regime change. Some pilot programs already under the name of Central European University were taking place at various locations in Budapest and Prague, which were the two first campuses of the university. The first graduation took place in Prague in June 1992 in programs in economic, society and politics and art history. We still had an art history program at that time. In Budapest, a teacher training program was run under the direction of Honak, whom you have just seen, in order to recruit young faculty members for the future department from the countries of the region. Then developments followed quickly. These are just illustrations of the profound embeddedness of the university and the pre-1989 opposition culture of Central and Eastern Europe, and in the culture of the political culture of the transition after 1990. You see some very important figures of these processes involved in events at CU. In the top left, George Soros is seen with Václav Havel, the Czech dissident writer who became the first president of the new Czechoslovakia and then the Czech Republic. Middle right, Bronislaw Geremek, the great Polish medieval historian, also an important dissident leader and government minister during the 1990s, in conversation with János Kiss, the gentleman in the middle, who was a leading figure of the Hungarian democratic opposition, and then for a while even the president of the Hungarian Liberal Party, while also the founding chairperson of the Department of Political Science at CU. The third gentleman is Tibor Váradi, a Hungarian legal scholar from Vojvodina in Serbia. And in the bottom left, you see in conversation Árpád Günc, who is a kind of Hungarian counterpart of Havel, a veteran of the 1956 anti-Soviet revolution in Hungary, imprisoned after the event, a writer and translator, and the first president of the Hungarian Republic after 1990, together with Adam Michnik, the great Polish opposition leader and journalist, with Timothy Garton Ash, the famous Oxford historian and political analyst of Central and Eastern Europe. So there was this very profound imbrication of the pursuits of breaking communism and then leading over the countries of the region to constitutional democracy and rule of law after 1990, which, as we say, were inscribed into the DNA of the university in those times. this is an illustration of the very strong regional focus of the university in those times. Statistics about recruitment and admissions into CU in those times. So we can see that from there was an overwhelming preponderance of what we call the traditional region, former Soviet Union, Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe among the student constituency. 95% of them came from the region at that time. By now, this has quite dramatically changed. CU today is a global university. Matthias may be talking about this a bit in the next presentation. And then this is another illustration of the early history. So within a couple of years, CU became a recognized university, accredited by the New York accreditation authorities. Our first rector, Alfred Stepan, celebrating the event. Now, so far this sounds like a spectacular success story, which it certainly was. But it needs to be added that, as a matter of fact, there were problems and dilemmas along the way. First of all, in the very early debates, the character and profile of the university was not entirely clear, whether it would be a strictly academic institution focused on scholarly programs, or a kind of training ground for managers and administrators, policymakers of the change, focusing more on business and policy. The decision was ultimately made in favor of a more academic orientation, even though later on CU incorporated the already existing International Business School of Budapest, and in the 2000s a large school of public policy was created, but the academic focus was decided early on and kept ever since. There are also debates about the future location of the university. As I mentioned, Budapest and Prague were the early venues where instruction started. Warsaw, for a while in the 1990s, hosted our Department of Sociology. The Open Society mission, combined with the international character of the university, was also not a foregone conclusion. Even after the downfall of communism, forces and stakeholders of closed societies were not in scarcity in the region. The international profile and character, cosmopolitanism, was also receiving mixed responses. The combination of these factors were also partly behind the fact that in 1994 the Prague campus had to be closed down because of misunderstandings, so to speak, with the center-right Czech government, but also in Hungary, and the far-right press, CU was labeled as a cosmopolitan institution, which is undermining the national loyalties of young Hungarians and young citizens of the region at large. So the Open Society mission and the international character of the university was not at all uncontroversial in the public sphere at the time. There are also other technical issues. I mean, we are talking about the early 1990s, so it could not at all be taken for granted that there would be a permanent and critical mass of supply of young students proficient enough in written and spoken English language to participate in high-quality graduate programs. Talking about which, it was also not clear whether CU would be a kind of springboard for a kind of interim stage in the formation of young scholars from the region who would then move on to more prestigious and more well-established universities in Western Europe and the United States to PhD programs, or the university ought to develop its full spectrum of graduate studies, put on its feet its own PhD programs, and compete on those grounds and on those bases with more established international counterparts. PhD programs actually started to be created in the middle of the 1990s, and by now they are pretty competitive. I must add. Now, perhaps I should now. Yeah, this is another formative moment. CU obtaining its own central building in downtown Budapest after having operated for a couple of years on rented premises. This is the building complex which we are sadly now leaving behind for the sake of Vienna. We are continuing to put them to important uses, but all the teaching of the graduate programs will have to be pursued in Vienna from September 2020. Now, I should maybe switch to the academic focus and orientation. In yellow, I have marked the original departments of the university, which in their various ways were obviously and intimately related to this program of open society and helping the region to raise an academic and intellectual elite that could be instrumental in the transition to market economy and democracy. Economics, political science and sociology, legal studies as well, with its programs in international business law, constitutional law, and human rights are obviously integral to this kind of program. International relations, which in the early times had the name International Relations and European Studies, was very profoundly geared to the integration of the countries of the region with the European Union. Environmental sciences and policy, again, quite obviously, were dedicated to dealing with soaring issues of the dilapidation of natural resources and environmental destruction in the countries of the region. At the time of the founding, the Chernobyl disaster had only been a couple of years behind. History and nationalism studies. Nationalism studies became an interdisciplinary program under the leadership of the Czech originating great sociologist Ernest Gellner, originally operating in Prague and then wrote to Budapest in 1995. There was a deep-seated worry and anxiety, which unfortunately turned out to be not at all unfounded, that after the internationalism, after communist internationalism, which was a sentiment that suppressed nationalism and related ideas and movements, after the fall of communism, nationalism will be a resurgent force in region, and a phenomenon which deserves a profound academic study. And history, and later on, even medieval studies, which for a short while operated as a sub-program within the history department, but then became the first program which created its PhD course. The relevance of history was also quite clear for many of us. It's a region torn by dark and conflictual, controversial historical memories, questions of identity, which were suppressed under the Soviet regime, also resurfaced very powerfully after 1990. Conflict and Coexistence in Central Europe was actually the title of the Dubrovnik course, which Peter Honak organized back in 1989. Coming to terms with this troubled past, especially the 20th century past of the region, with a view to the present and the future, was clearly understood to be central to the mission of the university. Now, how about the early history of the department? To come to a sort of conclusion, I will tell you a few words about the illustration, but first a couple of sentences about the character of the department in those early years. One of the preoccupations was naturally to focus on topics and fields of historical studies which had been neglected in the history education under the late years of communism. Modern social history, cultural history, intellectual history can be named as the fields which were surfacing in those times. Gender history became quite important already in the early years of the functioning of the department. As far as topics, obviously, recent history was agitating students profoundly, and histories of communism and fascism, and altogether the various kinds of authoritarian regimes in modern Europe became one of the focal themes of on the agenda of the department. But besides these themes, there was also a kind of connecting tissue, which is owing to the founding chair of the department, the historian Peter Honak, who in his early formation, early career, was a social and economic historian of the Habsburg monarchy, but then became very much interested in cultural history in the style of Karl Schorske's Fin de siècle Vienna. He wrote great comparative works about the culture of Budapest and Vienna in those times. Honak was a dedicated and committed Central European patriot, motivated by the idea of Central Europe, as he put it, as a region of the imagination, a region with unclear physical and geographic boundaries, rather living in the minds and hearts of the intellectual elite and the middle classes of the region. Central Europe, in this perspective, is a region where identification and awareness of the values of Western civilization, by and large, the values associated with the open society. So here, Honak's Central Europe was very much attuned to the overall mission of the university. So it is a region in which awareness and loyalty to these values is very strong, even stronger than among the peoples of Western Europe, where it is sort of taken for granted. In East Central Europe, these less happy regions of the continent, because of structural reasons of economic backwardness, the incompleteness of political structures, of power sharing, etc., etc., this is a region where sensitivity about these values is very strong, but it's a region which has been so far deprived of enjoying the full benefits of Western civilization. This is an idea that is encapsulated in the famous essay of Milan Kundera about the kidnapped West, the Czech emigre writer, first published in the French journal Le Débat in 1983. And there's another emblematic text on which these ideas are fully based by the Hungarian historian Jenő Szűcs about the three historical regions of Europe, which explains the structural background to this incompleteness and belatedness in the catching up of Central Europe with the West. And Honak regarded the department as a kind of laboratory in which it could be tested how far the free discussion among young students coming from all around the region about these soaring and controversial issues could lead them to a kind of reconciliation and a shared aspiration to leave this troubled past behind and once and for all relieve and redeem Central Europe from this incompleteness and belatedness. Now the book, whose title page is, the illustration here is entitled "Insisting on Utopia." It's a series of essays by Honak, partly autobiographical and partly academic. I tend to believe that the department was very much his utopia, the kind of belief in the redeeming force of free and unbiased discussion about highly controversial and troublesome issues of a shared past as a redemptive force. So indeed, this kind of mission cum academic focus was extremely strong in the first era of the department. Honak retired from the chair of the department in 1995 and was replaced by the University of Pennsylvania historian Alfred Weber, who's a great Soviet specialist, 19th and 20th centuries. On the left side, you can see his most recent volume and his magnum opus about the several centuries of struggle for the Eurasian borderlands. Now, under Professor Weber, who is still with us, he retired from teaching about 12 years ago, but he's a very active researcher who gives an account about his current work at the beginning of every academic year to the new students in the form of a public lecture. Under Weber, the department underwent an opening up of the regional focus. It was then that a more systematic look at Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe in systematically comparative terms became the hallmark of the department. It was also under Weber that the PhD program was put on its feet. More recurrent visiting faculty representing each of the geographic areas of the region were joining the department, and also a more systematic preoccupation with theoretical, methodological, and historiographical training for the students was introduced. This was an important stage in the development of the department towards what it is today. And since I think I have already pretty much abused the allotted time by now, I would rather stop here and welcome, of course, any questions and comments that our audience may have, and give the word back to Taku and to Matthias to follow up. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, László. We can understand the close connection between the recent history of Central Europe, recent history of the region, and the history or the activity, whole activity of CU. That's very much impressive. I have some questions from the audience. István, please. Mr. Ogawa has a question, and could you please?
Yes, so as I can see, this is in fact two questions. One concerns the memory of one of the military leaders of the 1848-49 Hungarian Revolution, the one who signed the unconditional surrender at the end of the revolution to the general of the Russian Tsar, who came to help the Habsburgs. And the other one, as far as I understand, is a more general question related to the fact when we try to respond to historical revisionism, or when we are engaged in public history, then what's the perspective we are doing all these things from? How partial or impartial, if it's possible, are we? So the first question is a complicated question. The figure has been re-examined, revalued several times in Hungarian history, which is partly related to the so-called tradition of national independence of Hungary in those times when our involvement in the world in general, in the West, and especially our relationship to our Western neighbors seem to be on the agenda as a historical value to upkeep. Then he was valued more positively, both in the public and also by official historians. Other times, when the agenda was to emphasize national independence or the tradition of resistance against foreign occupation, his figure was valued more negatively. The interesting fact is that after 1990, in the first Hungarian government, there were 6 historians. Even the prime minister, the first post-communist prime minister, was to a certain extent a failed historian. The speaker of the parliament was also a historian. And one of the members of the government was a specialist, a semi-professional historian, a specialist of the 1848-49 revolution. And to a large extent, the ambition of this first post-communist government was to do history by other means. What they were unable to achieve as historians, now they wanted to achieve from the position as politicians. And this expert of the 1848 revolution, when he became the mayor of one of the districts in Budapest, which happens to be the district where the royal palace and the castle are situated, he decided to set up a double human-size equestrian statue commemorating Arthur Görgei as a historical justice from this political position. So he's a controversial figure. The other question, which is probably more general, is that I would like to refer back to Professor Kontler's presentation when he tried to explain the idea of open society. And what he said is very relevant here. Open society does not mean open borders or simply an open political structure. But first of all, and that was the original guiding idea of both the foundation and the university, the contest of different ideas, the importance of uncertainty, that both the situation of the present, looking at it from different perspectives, looks uncertain, and the future is not foreclosed. It's not certain yet. Unlike at the time of communism, when it was possible to know for sure that the upcoming election would be won by the Communist Party by 99.9%, under normal democratic circumstances, you don't know what will happen at the next election, and you don't know what will happen as a result of public deliberation. And I think that this is the guiding principle of the university, that we are open to different ideas. We don't pretend that we have fixed notions for sure about issues even of history, but we are open to debates, different ideas, different perspectives. And this is what the open means in the notion of the guiding ideas of the university. So this is the perspective from which we try to engage in public history.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from Lisbon, of course, Pedro is also one of the main colleagues of this consortium, of the project. So Pedro, do you have?
I to all of you, my camera is not working on this computer, so I just have the sound. And it was just a brief note to congratulate you all on this great event. I also noticed that some Portuguese students are attending this session online, so I really hope that they felt enlightened about the information that you provided. It was extremely useful to have this trajectory of the CEU, its projects, and also the working of the Open Society archives. It was really very useful to me, and it will certainly help me to in my recruitment efforts for the future. So and I immensely appreciated what István told us about in his first intervention about the relevance of public history debates right now, and it's really, in a way, a privilege to be witnessing this time of very heated debates in which the past is being questioned in so many ways, sometimes in very passionate ways. And in this chat, I just leave you with the link to a news item that will show you how this topic is also becoming very hot now in Portugal, because some statues here of figures from the expansion and imperial era were also, let's say, targeted by people. So the debates here are very raw and very hot at the moment. So hopefully this will also interest students in enrolling in this kind of programs. So thank you all for your initiative.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, let me mention that this morning Churchill's statue became defaced even in Budapest. Yes, and it's really quite strange to watch these neo-Nazis in London defending Churchill's statue in Britain.
Thank you very much. If anyone has a comment or questions, Jeff, do you have some?
Yes. Okay, good afternoon from the Philippines.
Okay.
So my name is Jeff Mendez. I teach history in the Philippines. So here's my question for our speakers. Anyone can answer. So what would be the edge or strength of a Master of Arts in History in the Public Sphere program in CEU compared to some public history programs in the United States or in Australia? So since we all know that public history gave birth to the states, and perhaps I viewed the National Council of Public History website of in the United States of America, and they have their list of some institutions or universities accredited by them who offers public history. But I haven't seen the name of CEU. So can you give us shorts of this new venue?
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. So it's the question about when compared with the Australian or American institutions or American universities, then what is the, so to say, the strength of the CEU concerning the public history? Balázs or Matthias, or
maybe I can start, and then others can join. So I think what is very important, and thanks for this question. I think it's a very relevant question. I mean, like, there are two distinctive features, and one, I think we should reiterate that this is not located in one place. Yes, I mean, in contrast to an American program, which would be in in an American college or an American university, or Australian program, which would be in Australia. This is a multi-locational program. This is the point of this Erasmus Mundus construction that we are actually we received. So basically, students will start in Budapest and will go also to Vienna, then come back to Budapest. This is the first long semester. Then the second semester is in Tokyo, and then in the third semester they can choose between Florence or Lisbon. And then in the fourth semester, they can choose any of the 4 participating institutions, and they can also go for a shorter stay in Paris. Yeah, so this is a very, very different construction than what normally American or Australian universities do, even though some of them, of course, would have some sort of study abroad year for some of their programs. But this is a multi-locational, multinational educational program where people will have a comparative dimension that normally is not part of the educational curriculum of these programs. Yes, this is not a national program at all. And I think this is also very important to bear in mind, that we are talking about a kind of system that brings together very different historical and cultural experiences, linguistic cultures, intellectual cultures. So this is not just about one public history canon. And the reason why we are not present in the American on the American map is that this is a very, very new program. Yes, I mean, like, this is launched currently, and we clearly didn't have yet the opportunity to be very much part of this international circuit. I mean, like, this is the first students will arrive in September. So I mean, like, it is being now accredited and approved and all that. So I mean, like, we hope that on the long run we will be part of this institutional network. And I think what is also very important, and I would like to stress this, that in addition to the universities and the cities we mentioned, we work with a very big number of foundations, museums, archives. I mean, like, we of course mentioned many times today the Open Society archives, but for example in Portugal we will work with the Gulbenkian Foundation, and also with a museum that deals with the Portuguese resistance and during the dictatorship. And in all the cities we are working with partners, institutional partners that are actually giving opportunities of internship and other exchange opportunities for the students. And I think this is also something that probably is not that common for the type of public history programs that you are mentioning, which are usually located in one place, and then they are not able to kind of rotate their students in such a rich experience circuit. So I think this will be, on my part, the main issues, but maybe somebody can add something more.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much, so Jeff, for your question, and so thank you very much, Balázs, for the prompt answer. So unfortunately, so we must close the session. I'd like to express my deep gratitude, especially to the speakers from CU, and of course also all of you for participating in this event. So as a closing, our Dean of the Graduate School, Professor Aoyama, has a closing remark, please.
Okay. Hello. Can you all hear me? Okay, right. Well, nice to meet you again, Balázs and Matthias and István and László and all other Noemi and all other people. Yes, I'm glad to see you again in online. But I have to also apologize first because I can't participate. I couldn't participate in this this meeting from the beginning because of my academic, not academic, but administrative engagement with university affairs. Anyway, I joined in the, I really enjoyed the last half of the meeting, and I thought this meeting is quite relevant now because, as I think Pedro mentioned, that so because of this BLM movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and lots of statues are now being a controversial situation, and it's really hit our understanding of how important the public history is. And the notion of the public history is still new to Japan. But I think this situation really makes people in Japan interested in this new project. As Balázs said, this program, the HIPS program, is really it's multi-locational. It's literally multi-locational, and we are gathering the students from all over the world, not just EU and Japan, literally all over the world, and. That gives us a very strong edge. That gives us a comparative perspective to many things. It's the students in the Matthias presentation. This the social gathering with the students is very important. And then not just that, the campus really moves around the world, around the globe. The EU and then Japan and back to EU and Japan again. So this kind of the environment give the students a very, very good kind of vantage point where they can see and they compare the historical objects in the public health situation. And yes, this is a very unique and a challenging program because this is the first time, I think this is the first time the EU, Erasmus Mundus, and then Japanese government are engaged in this kind of joint venture, really joint venture. And we are very, and I myself are very proud to be part of this program. Okay, so thanks for Taku, thanks for preparation, and also Hisako and other HIPS coordinator in Japan and also in EU. I think we had a very good and interesting meeting today. I checked the number of the participants, and it just, I think it hit probably max 80, but even towards the end of the closing time, we still maintain kind of 40 or so participants. So it has been a very, very useful and interesting, successful meeting for this HIPS program. Okay. Hopefully next time we are going to see all of us in where? Vienna or Budapest, and whether in a real sense or online sense, whatever. But I can see this is really going to be a very good start for the HIPS program. Okay, thank you for everyone for participating in this meeting today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Toru, thank you very much for your words. I don't know if I can speak on behalf of everybody, but let me thank you for organizing this event, and even more for the lasting friendship we are entertaining between our two institutions, which also is very much a personal friendship, or has become personal friendship. And so we are very much looking forward to our next in-person meeting, and it's a wonderful perspective that this program will bind us together for the foreseeable time. And thank you again for inviting us to Tokyo this morning for us, evening for you. Okay.
Thank you very much. So we tried this kind of events the first time, but I think it is not so only the emergency substitution of the, so to say, the physical contact, but I think that it can be also the very creative way of communications, academic communication. So I hope we will have another such kind of meeting very soon, and on the topic of public history.